we're going to talk about Abraham tonight, and we'll kick right into it because I think it's pretty important, right? So we'll start in the beginning, right? He said, he being God, said, take your son, take your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. How many of you guys are fathers out here? All right. I am, and I'm going to confess, I've never experienced the trauma of the loss of a child. Never had that trauma, and I'm thankful to God that I've not. Right? I've never had a miscarriage, and none of that. But I can tell you this: if I heard God tell me to sacrifice my son, I'd be like, "What the F is going on?" Right? I mean, what am I hearing? And who am I hearing it from? I mean, that's not the God that I know. I mean, if you read further on, God says that having your children pass through the fires is an abomination, right? That's just not who God is. So why would God say, Abraham, hit the road, go take your kid out and offer him up on a hill I'm telling you about, right? I don't know. But we're going to talk about that just a little bit tonight. But for those of you who've experienced that loss, truly, I empathize with you. I don't understand that. I can't imagine the pain. I can't imagine the grief or the anger that come with any of that. Right? I just can't imagine it. But even more so, I can't imagine not only the loss of my child, but me being the cause of it, right? I mean, I can't imagine being a father in a car in an accident that I caused, and my kid being killed. And that's an accident, right? I mean, that's you may have been, negligent in your driving, but you weren't intentionally doing that. But I can't imagine taking my kid out, shoving a knife in its heart, and sacrificing on an altar. I can't imagine it, right? I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I'll tell you, we read through the Bible. I do at least, almost flippantly, right? We read these stories. We know it's the truth. We know that the word, every bit of the word of God is the word of God, right? From Genesis to Revelation, it's all the truth with a capital T. I know that. I mean, I know that in my heart of hearts. I know that in every part of my being. But, oftentimes, I read it as a story or as a textbook. I don't read it necessarily as, with the depth and the rigor that God put into it, right? Not really getting the full measure and the full impact of that, right? And that's a good topic to talk about. But that's not the topic we're going to talk about tonight. Maybe another night we'll talk about that, but not tonight, right? So we're going to talk about Abraham. I mean, it's a broad topic, lots of opportunity, but we're going to kind of camp out in this area of Abraham offering Isaac as a sacrifice. And we're going to talk about how did we get here, right? How did we get to this point where God has told Abraham, take your son and offer him up as a sacrifice? How did we get here? And what's the impact of that, right? And now I'm sure for most of you, or any of you been in and around the church, you've probably heard a lot about Abraham, and you're thinking, yep, I know all about Abraham. You probably sang the Father Abraham song. My granddaughter sang it, or I don't think they do anymore, but a couple years ago they sang it every night before bedtime. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. So you all know that song. If you don't, talk to me later. We'll sing it, or Brandon will teach it to you. And you probably know a lot about Abraham. Probably know a ton. You probably know more than I know about Abraham. But tonight we're gonna just dive in with some detail in this one particular part, because we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks talking about Abraham. I mean, think about it. If you went to Pastor Taylor's message a couple of weeks ago, he spent an entire sermon on Paul, an apostle of God in Christ Jesus. and a whole message on that, right? So think about chapter after chapter after chapter of Abraham. We could spend weeks, right? So we're gonna talk about that particular portion of Abraham's journey to faith. And if I do my job well tonight, if God has led me appropriately and has softened your hearts and opened your ears, we're all going to walk out of here with just maybe a little bit better understanding of growing in faith, walking in faith, and then maybe a little bit more of a long-term view, right? Because we all have this kind of a microwave society. We have finite minds, and sometimes it's difficult to cast our visions a little bit longer than next week. I mean, for me it is. Maybe I'm an outlier. Maybe you guys, where you're going 20, 30, 40 years from now, or what God has planned for you. But for me, sometimes I can't get past Tuesday. And that's on Tuesday morning. So that's what we're going to hopefully get to, right? But here's the thing I want you to think about as we go through this, right? As we intentionally slow down, we got to look at what God has done in and through us. And then we have to kind of prayerfully try to apply that to the future. Not that saying that God is always going to, if you're let's say you're a bricklayer, maybe God's not always going to make you be a bricklayer, but think about where he's brought you from, what he's done through you, in you and through you, and how do you apply that to the future, right? So let's start at the beginning. I'm going to use the Amplified Version because I like the way it reads, especially for this particular passage. If you're not familiar with the Amplified Version, it's one of my favorites. I've got maybe a dozen or so favorites, but this is one of them. We're going to start in Genesis 22 because that's where this whole chapter, we're going to kind of cover the whole chapter tonight. And it starts out, it says, "Now after these things, God tested the faith and commitment of Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham,' and he answered, 'Here I am.'" So after these things, what does that mean? I mean, what things have happened to where God is going to, he's going to test Abraham. Why? What's the test? Why is God going to test Abraham? What things have happened that's going to move him to test him? Well, the list is long, right? So we could read the whole thing. We could spend the whole night talking about just the chapters from Abraham's calling to here, but I'm going to paraphrase, right? So Abraham was 75 years old, which is young in those days. I'm almost 60, so I'm young. I'm a child compared to Abraham, right? I'm a kid. I'm a teenager. Look at me now. I'm a teenager, right? So God told him, he said, "Hey, leave the place where you are and go to the place I'm going to give you." And he did. And God prospered him, right? He prospered him, made him find favor wherever he went. Where Abraham put a foot, he prospered. He promised him a son from whom all nations would be blessed. He gave him victory in battle when Lot was kidnapped. He had him blessed by Melchizedek. If you have not read that part of the Genesis, read about Melchizedek, right? He's a foreshadowing of Christ. He visited Abraham with numerous times in angelic form. As well as Abraham had dreams, visions, and he apparently heard the audible voice of God. Abraham had himself and all of his clan and household circumcised to fulfill the covenant God made with him. So let's stop, just pause there for a second. So he had him at 75, at this time he's probably in his early to mid 80s, right? Him and all of his clan and his household. So we think about clan and household. I've got 3 in my family, in my current clan. In those days, we have to look at the culture of this is like 2100 BC, so a long time ago in the Middle East. Probably about 1,000, 1,200-ish, maybe a few more, because Lot hadn't separated yet. So maybe between 1,000 and 2,000 people. That's a clan. That's the clan we're talking about. And so all these males getting circumcised. So if you're not circumcised, you don't have to raise your hand. Think about being an adult male and having to be circumcised in 2100 BC. Flint knives, maybe, I don't know if it's Bronze Age yet, but certainly not, a scalpel, anesthesia, and a newborn babe. So that's the commitment that Abraham had based upon the covenant that God promised him, right? God promised him a son again, and he told him of his plans for Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham and God, they were pretty tight. I mean, pretty tight. I'm going to give you a couple examples of how God viewed Abraham. The Lord said, "Shall I keep secret from Abraham, my friend and servant, what I'm going to do, since Abraham is destined to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him? For I have known, I've chosen, acknowledged him as my own, so that he may teach and command his children and the sons of his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is righteous and just, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has promised him." And probably 1,400 years later, Isaiah says, "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend." Right? So God called Abraham his friend. And he confided in him. I mean, I don't know about you. Maybe you're different than I am. But man, I'd love to be listed as God's friend and confidant. I mean, if my tombstone said, "Rick, God's friend and confidant," life's good. I don't think you can get probably better than that, right? But no, we've gone through all the great things about Abraham, all the good things about Abraham, all the things that make him in the Hall of Heroes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because as you may be aware, the Bible doesn't whitewash their heroes. And neither should we, right? We should look at folks with the same eye that God has, right? I mean, people are people, right? And people can get really kind of people-y, which is sometimes frustrating. But people are people, right? So here's some of maybe the cons. If you're listing up, the pros and cons of Abraham, here's some of the cons, right? God told him to go to Canaan. Abraham went to Egypt. He stopped in Canaan. The crops aren't doing so good. Let's go a little further to Egypt, right? So he's not trusting God's provision, so he goes to Egypt. While he's there, he tells his hosts, he's 1,000 people strong. So he's not like the guy moving into the house at the end of the block. A family. It's 1,000 people coming into your country. So he tells his host, "Hey, my wife, she's in her 70s, but man, she's good looking. That's my sister. She's my sister." So he tells him, "Hey, she's my sister." Pharaoh's like, "She is hot. She's going to my place." So he takes Abraham's wife as a concubine until God intervenes, right? God steps in and says, "This isn't how it's supposed to be." He appears to Pharaoh in a dream. Pharaoh gets mad, says, "What are you trying to do to me? Why would you do this to me?" And Abraham's like, "Well, I was worried you're going to kill me because of my wife." So he gives him his wife back, gives him a bunch of cattle and sheep and goats, and sends him on his way, right? Later on, he listens to his wife. Not that you shouldn't listen to your wife, but if God tells you something, your wife's probably not smarter than God. So he listens to his wife. His wife says, "Hey, I know God told us we're going to have a son. I can't bear. I'm 90 years old. I'm not going to have a kid. Take my maid. She's fertile. Take her." Right? So he listens to his wife. Has a child with his wife. That's a disastrous thing, right? He goes to another leader. He lies about his wife again. It's my sister. More disastrous results, right? But God had to intervene, because at this point, God had said, "In about a year, your wife will have a child." So he runs to another leader and says, "Hey, she's my sister." The leader takes her into his harem, and God's like, "You are not to touch her. If you touch her, you and all of your family and all of your people will die." And so the leader goes, "Oh, I'm not going to touch her." And so they make a covenant that says, "I did not touch your wife," because there was no way that God was going to let somebody else get credit for the birth of the child that he promised. Right? So anyways, Abraham was human, right? He's just like us. He failed. Abraham's probably the person, if I was going to look at my life and go, who am I like in the Bible? Well, probably nobody, but if I had to pick one, Abraham. I've screwed up a lot, right? A lot of things I can go, dang, that was stupid. And Abraham can do that. He can go, man, I was dumb. But in the end, he trusted the Lord. In fact, we're told at nearly the beginning of Abraham's story, starts out and says, then Abraham believed in, affirmed, trusted in, relied on, remained steadfast to the Lord, and being the Lord, counted it to him as righteousness, which was doing right in regard to God and man, right? So here we are. So after these things, all of these things, God tested the faith and commitment of Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. So here's lesson number one, and it may have been a little bit round the ring to get there, but we're never going to be perfect, right? We're never going to be perfect, but have I believed in, affirmed, trusted, relied on, remained steadfast to Jesus, right? That's the first thing. That's the first lesson. Have you given your life to Jesus, right? I mean, we're gonna have valleys in our lives, every one of us. Sometimes it's our own sin. Sometimes it's somebody else's sin, right? Or sometimes it's just the fallen world we live in. And sometimes God's going to purposefully bring us through a valley to refine and improve us. I mean, he's going to use all of those activities to refine and improve us, but sometimes it's going to be specifically because God says, let's take you through a valley. Okay, on where we go. So Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and he took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he split the wood for the burnt offering. And then he got up and he went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, that's important, remember that. On the third day of travel, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. So here we are, no delay. No discussion. No bargaining. No questions. Maybe some internal conflict. I don't know. Bible doesn't say. We're just told that the next morning early, they got started. Why? Why no apparent haggling? I mean, if you read the story of Abraham, I mean, come on. He haggled with God over the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. He didn't have a dog in the hunt, but he haggled 3 or 4 or 5 times. What about 50? What about 40? What about 20? What about 10? What if you find 5 righteous men? Would you forsake destroying the city, right? I mean, so he haggled over a city he didn't have a dog in the hunt on, but he's not going to haggle over his son's life? Apparently not, because I think the Bible would have told us if he did. So apparently he didn't. And here's what I think, and I could be wrong, and I could be wrong on a lot of this stuff, but here's what I think. And I think we'll see in a moment, and it'll kind of lead us towards lessons 2 and 3, right? So Abraham says to his servants, settle down and stay here with the donkey. The young man and I will go over there and worship God, and we will come back to you. I'm going to read that a little bit slower, that last part, right? The young man and I will go over there and worship God, and we will come back to you. We will worship, and we will come back. All right? So from those words, it's obvious that Abraham trusted God. I mean, he didn't necessarily know what's going to happen. He didn't necessarily know the end of the story, but he trusted him, right? I mean, even if it was the resurrection of his dead son back to life, he knew that Abraham and Isaac, would return from worship, because he knew the promise that God had made, right? The promise that God had made that from your offspring I will bless the earth. All nations will be blessed because of too numerous of the stars, right? So lesson number 2, as I promised, is this: move, do, go. Or whatever it is, right? If we follow lesson number 1, right, we've believed that Jesus is our Lord and Savior. We pray, we follow those things. What's God telling you to do? I mean, it doesn't have to be something as extravagant or as extreme as sacrificing your offspring. I mean, it might be as simple as getting in his word more regularly, right? Fasting when you're nudged to fast. praying for that person that you despise. That's me. I need to do that more often, right? Joining the home group. Talking to that colleague at work about a guy that you know, Jesus, right? I mean, it's really that simple, right? Move, do, go. Do what God's told you to do, right? And I think if you look back, I mean, if you read, I'm certainly paraphrasing a lot of Abraham's life. If you look back over the course of life, it's 30 to 35 years before we get to the point from where God told Abraham, leave where you're at, go where I'm telling you to go, to where he gets to where he's going to sacrifice Isaac. So it's not like it's, said the prayer of salvation, and the next day God has told me to go to Africa to be a missionary. It's usually not that extreme, right? And it's not that quick. I mean, our faith is an adventure, right? It's in steps, right? And Abraham ventured out in steps. I mean, it's a progression. And that's probably how it's going to be in your life. I'm going to venture that, right? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. But you got to get moving. And the next set of verses we're going to cover is going to kind of push us forward to lesson number 3, right? So then Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and he laid it on the shoulders of his son Isaac. So think about that. You got to carry your own wood that you're going to get slain upon. Okay. I think somebody else we knew that did that, right? Carried his own wood for a little while. All right. He took the fire pot in his own hand and the sacrificial knife, and the two of them walked on together. And Abraham says to Isaac, he says, my father. And Abraham said, here I am, son. Isaac said, look, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide for himself a lamb for the burnt offering. So the two walked on together. So here's Abraham answering his son, right? Isaac's surely questioning God, you know. And if we do a little study on Isaac, which we might do another night, we'll see that I don't think Isaac had the same level of faith as his father. Surely he trusted. But I think he trusted his father and his father's faith more than he trusted his own faith. Right? And Abraham trusted, right? He believed, and he stepped out in the faith of what God could and would do. And so to me, that's kind of lesson number 3, right? Trust that God will do what he said he would do. I mean, God told him he's going to give him an inheritance, his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And Abraham trusted that. I'm taking my son. God said sacrifice him. He told me he's also going to give me the stars, as numerous as the stars in the sky, descendants. So I'm going to trust God to do what he said he would do. Right? All right, it's 7:03. I'm going to start winding down because we're going to have to do some table talk. But I think we got to know what happened first, right? I mean, we don't know what happens. Maybe you do. You probably read the back of the book, but we got to know what happens in the story and why, right? So Isaac's asked about the sacrifice. Where's the sacrifice? Abraham told him God will provide. So what happens? So if we get back to the story, when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar. It doesn't say that he had to fight Isaac. Doesn't say he had to wrestle him. Doesn't say he had to knock him out. Doesn't say he had to do anything. I mean, we're talking Abraham's probably 110, 112 years old. A little more than a teenager, but older. Isaac's probably 10, 15. Probably take his old man. Although if you were 10 or 15, you tried to take your old man when you were a kid, you found out you couldn't. But think about it. No fight. Isaac apparently joyfully took to be tied and put on the altar. Right? Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. And he said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him there was a ram, caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So there you got it, end of the story. God provided a ram. Abraham offered it as a sacrifice. But here's the part I don't really completely understand. Why? Why? I mean, why did God ask him to do it in the first place? This next little bit may help, and then I'll add a little clarification at the end. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gates of his enemy, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So if you remember, we started out with, and after all these things. All right, so all of the things that it took to get Abraham to the point where he's willing to sacrifice his son. So after all these things, God set about to test Abraham. And at the end, we find that God learns that Abraham truly feared God. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't understand theologically, biblically. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not a theologian. I'm just a dumb guy who operated nuclear power plants. Right? So there are a lot of things I don't understand. But I do know this. God knows everything, right? He knows what was going to happen. He knew what Abraham was going to do. He knew what was going to be the outcome. So certainly the testing wasn't for God. I mean, it wasn't for him to find something out. It wasn't like he was going to get surprised. Oh, man, I didn't know that he was going to do this. I mean, he already knew that. He already knows that. He knows what's going to happen. And so here's what I think. Here's what Rick thinks. Shout me down if you don't believe, if you don't agree with me. I'm okay with that, right? Here's what I think. It was for Isaac. It was for Abraham. It was for us, right? It's a foreshadowing of Christ, right? It's a sacrifice in place of us. Abraham was promised that all the peoples would be blessed through his offspring. So here's a guy 99 years old without an offspring to his name, other than Ishmael, but we won't go there, right? And he's promised all of the nations of the world. God tells Abraham, look up at the stars in the sky and count them. I will give you that many offspring. If you've been in the desert and counted stars, you probably got tired after about 100 and you had gone maybe a quarter of an inch, right? There's tons of stars, right? So here's Abraham, right? He knows that he's going to be blessed because of his offspring. So the substitutionary sacrifice of the ram over Isaac points us toward the coming substitutionary sacrifice of Christ for all of Abraham's spiritual offspring. As Brandon so eloquently told us earlier, we are Abraham's offspring, right? We're spiritual offspring of Abraham. Whether we are descended from him physically, we are spiritually, right? So I can say, maybe I'm wrong. It's a good discussion to have. And maybe it's a good study to engage in. Maybe we'll do something like that later, or maybe you can do something, right? All right, I'm pretty much done, but let's recap. But before I do that, I want you to think one last thing, right? If you were Abraham or you were Isaac, and this event happened to you, do you think it'd be a watershed moment in your life? I think so. To me, it'd be, oh, that's something's going to happen, right? So let's see what the rest of the story tells us. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham lived in Beersheba. Now after these things, it was told to Abraham, behold, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. And that's pretty much the end. I mean, there's a little bit more. I mean, Genesis pretty quickly wraps up the life story of Abraham, and without much fanfare, transition through Isaac's life, another fascinating little study, which maybe we'll do another time. But really, there's no reference to the episode, right? There's no festival. There's no special day. There's no pilgrimage to the mount where God will provide nothing, right? The only place you'll find anything is in the Muslim faith. Is they believe Abraham and got rid of all of any kind of infidelity to God and they celebrate his sacrifice of Isaac, or his willing sacrifice. That's still the place where it is. So it's like, I mean, there's nothing there. Nothing that goes there, right? But here, I'll tell you this, and this one's free. So if you paid for your admission, you don't got to pay any more. This is no extra charge. Don't forget the things that God's done in you and through you, all right? I mean, your testimony is so important in that regard, right? If you look at Revelation tells us, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives unto the death. So it's important on many levels, right? But the point of the word tonight is that remembering what God has done will help you be confident in the things that he will do, right? If you know that God has sustained you in the past, you can be confident that he'll sustain you in the future. If you know that God has helped you through something in the past, he'll help you through something in the future, all right? All right, just something to think about. Just something to think about. So let's wrap it up. So tonight we covered 3 lessons from this little sliver of Abraham's life, and those 3 lessons are this, right? First, put your trust in Jesus. We're never going to be perfect, but Jesus is, and we need to put our faith and trust in that. Number 2, move, do, go. And finally, number 3, trust that God will do what he said he'll do. And it really kind of flows that way, right? It's kind of a cycle, right? I mean, we're not going to do the circle of life. We're not going to do a Lion King kind of thing here, but it is kind of a cycle, right? You trusted Jesus and you believe he can do what the word says he can do. And that confidence gets you to do what he tells you to do. And then you believe that he'll do what he told you he'd do. And then it continues, right? So your faith is increased because you watched him do what he said he would do. Your belief is firmer. Your heart hears God better. And then you do what he tells you because you believe that he can. And you trust that he will. And again, and again, and again. Okay? That's all I got, fellas.